Robert Redford was one of the greatest names in modern Hollywood. The 89-year-old actor died early this morning at his home in Utah. That's according to his publicist.
The world woke up today to a piece of news that instantly brought silence to countless homes, movie theaters, and hearts across the globe. Robert Redford, the man whose name had long been etched into the very foundation of cinema, has passed away at the age of 89. For decades, he was not just a Hollywood star, but a symbol of resilience, independence, and artistry, someone who shaped the direction of film far beyond his own career. And now, after a lifetime of creativity and quiet determination, his journey has come to an end. According to his family's representative, Robert Redford died peacefully in his sleep at his cherished residence nestled in the mountains near Sundance, Utah. He had always described this place as his refuge, a home where nature, art, and life converged into something pure and restorative. To those closest to him, it seemed only fitting that his final moments were spent there, surrounded by the people he loved most. His passing, though not entirely unexpected given his age, has left the world with an irreplaceable void, one that no accolades, no films, and no memorials can truly fill. The official statement issued on behalf of his family was brief, simple, and dignified, very much in the spirit of Redford himself. It confirmed that he had passed away in the early hours of September 16, 2025, that he was at peace, and that he had left this world in the privacy of his mountain home. The family also made a clear request that the public respect their need for quiet in these intimate, heartbreaking hours. No details about a funeral or public service were provided. It was a deliberate choice that echoed Robert Redford's lifelong approach to his personal life. Even in his youth, at the height of fame, he had always kept a certain distance between himself and the media, guarding his private world with remarkable discipline. That restraint followed him to the very end, and while the announcement left the public yearning for more details, it also served as one last reminder of who Robert Redford truly was, a man who valued privacy as much as he valued artistry. Within hours of the announcement, the world's largest news outlets ran the story. CNN opened its broadcast with solemn coverage, calling him a lion of cinema who forever changed the course of film history. The New York Times released an obituary that emphasized not just his career as an actor, but his monumental impact as a director, activist, and founder of the Sundance Institute. People magazine highlighted the deeply human side of the man, reminding readers that behind the golden-haired icon of the 1960s and 70s stood a father, husband, and friend who had navigated triumphs and tragedies with quiet dignity. These outlets and countless others around the globe underscored the same detail. Robert Redford passed in peace, in the place he loved, leaving behind a world that would not soon forget him. While the family remained largely silent in those first few hours, one voice did rise above the collective grief, the voice of his wife, Sabeel Sagars. In a short but deeply moving statement, she spoke of his final moments and what his loss meant to her. "Robert left us quietly at home," she said. "For me, this is a loss that cannot be repaired." Her words, though brief, carried a rawness that no official announcement could capture. She urged people not to remember him solely as a film legend or an international star, but as a devoted husband, a loving father, and a loyal friend. It was a plea that reminded the world that behind the Hollywood legend was a man who belonged to his family first. Her voice trembled as she spoke, reflecting not just grief, but the immeasurable weight of having to say goodbye to the person she had shared her life with for nearly 3 decades. In later reflections, Sabeel shared small glimpses into their final days together. She admitted that nothing seemed unusual at first. They continued their conversations as they always had, speaking about everyday things, art, nature, their shared projects, and family. But there were subtle signs that, in hindsight, carried a deeper meaning. She recalled how Robert sometimes held her hand for a long time, longer than usual, and whispered words that seemed almost like a farewell. "I want you to know that I have found peace with you," he once told her. At the time, she didn't interpret it as a goodbye. She simply felt reassured by his quiet certainty. But now, looking back, She understands that he had been preparing her in his own way. He had never been a man to openly dwell on frailty or fear. His manner was understated yet filled with meaning. One evening, Robert mentioned his late sons, Scott and James, in a way that left her stunned. He spoke of missing them, of longing to see them again. For Sibylla, the words were devastating. Both sons had passed years earlier, and though Robert rarely discussed the subject, the pain of their loss had always lingered beneath the surface. Hearing him bring them up again, so tenderly, made her realize that he was thinking beyond this life, yearning for a reunion with those he had loved and lost. She confessed that she could not hold back her tears in that moment. They sat together in silence, holding hands tightly, sharing an understanding that needed no words. For her, it was one of the most profound experiences of their marriage, a moment where Robert revealed his most private, hidden feelings, allowing her to glimpse the depths of his soul. She only later recognized that this was, in fact, his way of saying goodbye. As the news of Robert Redford's death spread, the Hollywood community was quick to react, and the tributes poured in with a sense of immediacy and raw grief. To many, it felt as though an entire era of cinema had just closed its doors. Jane Fonda, who had shared the screen with Redford in some of the most beloved films of the 20th century, was among the first to issue a statement. Her words, written with unmistakable heartbreak, read, "It hit me hard this morning when I read that Bob was gone. I can't stop crying. He meant a lot to me and was a beautiful person in every way." Fonda, who had always described her working relationship with Redford as one of the most rewarding of her career, seemed unable to hold back her grief. For many fans, her tribute underscored the unique bond the two shared on screen and off, a partnership that represented the golden age of Hollywood chemistry. Meryl Streep also added her voice, offering a short but powerful reflection. "One of the lions has passed," she wrote, a simple sentence that nevertheless captured the magnitude of his absence. For Streep, and for countless others in the industry, Robert Redford was not just another actor or director. He was a force, a towering figure whose very presence symbolized an ideal of artistry and integrity. Her statement, brief as it was, struck a chord with many who felt that cinema itself had lost one of its greatest guardians. Soon after, other actors, directors, and producers, from Martin Scorsese to Brad Pitt to younger independent filmmakers who had once benefited from the Sundance Institute, began to share their stories and condolences. Each voice added another layer to the portrait of a man who had not only achieved personal greatness, but had also lifted others into the spotlight. Social media platforms lit up almost instantly. Instagram was flooded with black and white stills from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting, films that had etched Redford into cinematic history. On Twitter, the hashtag Dr. Robert Redford trended globally, with fans, critics, and colleagues alike posting personal memories, favorite film clips, and heartfelt reflections. Independent filmmakers, in particular, used the moment to acknowledge how much Redford's creation of the Sundance Film Festival had meant to them. For many, Sundance wasn't just a festival. It was a launching pad, a space where voices ignored by mainstream Hollywood finally found a stage. The sorrow in their posts was palpable, but so too was a sense of gratitude. They understood better than most that Redford had not only changed his own destiny, but had altered the course of film for generations to come. In Hollywood itself, production sets paused to observe moments of silence. At one major studio in Los Angeles, a film crew reportedly gathered together to watch a clip from All the President's Men, acknowledging the legacy of a performer who had once brought the craft to new heights. Others replayed his directorial masterpiece Quiz Show, discussing how he had managed to balance entertainment with social critique. This wave of mourning carried a sense of reverence that extended far beyond celebrity culture. It was as though the industry had lost a guardian, someone who had stood for authenticity in an increasingly commercialized landscape. Amid the cascade of tributes, however, the Redford family remained firmly private. They made it clear that there would be no public funeral, no elaborate memorial service organized for the masses. Instead, they wished to grieve in silence, surrounded only by the people who had truly known and loved him. This announcement surprised no one who had followed Redford's life. Privacy had been his shield for decades. He had spent years evading tabloid intrusion, refusing to play into the spectacle of celebrity, and safeguarding the sanctity of his family's life. The decision to keep his funeral private felt like a natural continuation of that philosophy, a way of ensuring that his departure, like his life, remained dignified and uncluttered by the noise of public attention. Yet even within that silence there was speculation. Many began to wonder whether the Sundance Institute, the organization he had founded in 1981 and nurtured into the beating heart of independent cinema, would eventually hold some form of public memorial. Some argued that the Institute itself was the most appropriate place for a tribute, a gathering point for filmmakers, actors, and visionaries whose careers had been touched by his generosity. In the days that followed, small candlelight vigils were held outside theaters in Park City, Utah, where the Sundance Film Festival had become an annual tradition. Independent artists and fans alike came together to celebrate the life of the man who had given them a chance when Hollywood would not. They spoke of him as a patron, a visionary, and a mentor, someone whose loss was not just personal, but communal. For those who had worked closely with him, the lack of spectacle was no surprise. Robert Redford had always avoided the trappings of fame. In interviews throughout his life, he often expressed discomfort with the relentless gaze of the media and the superficiality that came with Hollywood celebrity. To him, film was never about glamour. It was about storytelling, truth, and the possibility of change. He once said, "The part of my life that belongs to the public, that's the work. The rest is mine." That philosophy carried him from his earliest days as an actor through his later years as a director and activist. And in the end, it shaped his farewell. No grand parades, no endless speeches, no glittering ceremonies, only simplicity, privacy, and silence. This simplicity, however, did not lessen the impact of his absence. In fact, it may have made the world feel his loss even more deeply. In a culture accustomed to grand farewells, Robert Redford's quiet exit stood out as profoundly moving. It reminded people that here was a man who had lived life on his own terms and had chosen to leave it the same way. And though the details of his funeral remain known only to his closest family, the legacy he left behind is written in the hearts of those who admired him. The films that continue to inspire, and the festival that still champions independent voices. In that sense, his departure was not truly an end, but a passing of the torch to all those who now carry forward the ideals he valued most. Hollywood's reaction to the news of Robert Redford's death was immediate, raw, and deeply emotional. Within minutes of the official confirmation from his family, tributes began pouring in from every corner of the entertainment industry. Jane Fonda, who shared the screen with him in multiple films and had once described him as her most trusted co-star, issued a heartfelt statement. She spoke not of his fame, nor of the awards that lined his shelves, but of the way he made people feel safe on set. "Robert had a quiet strength that allowed everyone around him to shine," she wrote. "He was my partner in some of the most important moments of my career, and my heart breaks knowing I will never again hear his laughter echo behind the camera." Her words echoed what so many in Hollywood were trying to articulate. Redford was not just an actor, but a collaborator who elevated those around him. Meryl Streep, who rarely comments publicly in such moments, also spoke with an unusual openness about her grief. She recalled working with Redford on Out of Africa, describing him as a man who carried mystery, charm, and gentleness in equal measure. She revealed that he had once told her he never truly cared about being remembered as a star. He only wanted to be remembered as someone who tried to tell the truth. Robert, she said, didn't just act. He listened, he gave, and he carried a piece of nature within him everywhere he went. Other co-stars and directors echoed the sentiment, highlighting that Redford had a way of grounding even the most chaotic productions with his calm, steady presence. Directors who had worked with him also shared their grief. Martin Scorsese released a short but powerful note, saying that Redford had a filmmaker's eye. Even as an actor, He remembered how Redford could dissect a script, not just as a performer, but as someone who understood pacing, structure, and the soul of a story. Sidney Pollack, who had directed Redford in several films, had once famously called him the kind of actor who makes directing seem like less of a job and more of a partnership. Though Pollack himself passed years earlier, his words were repeated in many of the tributes, a reminder of the lasting creative bond between the two. But the mourning extended far beyond Hollywood royalty. Younger actors who had grown up admiring Redford also stepped forward. Brad Pitt described him as a man who walked with grace in a world that often forgot what that looked like. Leonardo DiCaprio, who has devoted much of his life to environmental activism much like Redford, posted a simple tribute with a photo of the two of them. "We owe so much to Robert, not just in cinema but in the fight to protect this planet. His work inspired me, and millions of others, to believe that art and activism could live side by side." Social media was quickly flooded with similar memories, not only from celebrities but also from fans who recalled brief encounters with him, always noting his humility, his kindness, and the way he made ordinary people feel seen. At the Sundance Institute, which Redford founded in 1981, the grief was perhaps most personal. Staff members described how even in his later years, Redford still stopped by, checked in on young filmmakers, and quietly encouraged them when they doubted themselves. A young director remembered how Redford had once sat through her entire short film, then pulled her aside to tell her not to give up. "He didn't have to do that," she wrote, "but he did. That was Robert." Stories like these painted a portrait of a man who used his fame not to build walls but to open doors, especially for those just starting out. As the tributes mounted, what stood out was not the talk of his wealth, his fortune, or even his legendary good looks. It was the quieter memories, the gentle laugh, the thoughtful advice, the willingness to step back so others could step forward, that revealed who Robert Redford truly was. To the public, he was an icon. To those who knew him, he was a friend, a mentor, and a man who carried dignity in every stage of his life. In the days following Robert Redford's death, attention turned to the question of how his life would be honored, and as many suspected, the answer reflected the man himself, quietly, intimately, and far away from the bright lights of Hollywood. His family released a brief statement explaining that Redford had long expressed his wish for a private funeral, with only immediate family and a handful of close friends in attendance. True to his character, there would be no grand red carpet farewell, no stadium packed with mourners, and no television cameras capturing every moment. For a man who spent most of his career in front of millions, Robert seemed to want his final chapter to be shared with only those he loved most. The decision did not surprise those who knew him. Throughout his career, Redford had shown a remarkable ability to balance public life with an intensely guarded private one. He never allowed Hollywood to consume his identity. Even at the height of his fame, he retreated often to his home in Sundance, Utah, preferring the stillness of nature over the noise of fame. In interviews, he was known for his thoughtful pauses, his reluctance to reveal more than he felt was necessary, and his refusal to play the tabloid game. He was famous, but he never craved attention. That distinction set him apart, and it shaped how his final goodbye would unfold. Still, the lack of a public service left many fans yearning for a way to pay their respects. While the funeral itself would remain private, whispers began to spread of a larger memorial event that might take place at the Sundance Institute later in the year. Sources close to the organization hinted at the possibility of a festival-wide tribute, where young filmmakers and seasoned artists alike could gather to celebrate the man who had given them a platform. It would not be a traditional Hollywood memorial, but rather something more in line with Robert's values, an event that emphasized art, creativity, and community over spectacle. For many, that felt like the truest way to honor him. The conversation around his funeral also sparked a broader reflection on Redford's lifelong commitment to privacy. In a world where celebrities often felt compelled to share every detail of their lives, Redford resisted. He believed there was strength in mystery, dignity in holding certain things close to the chest. Even in death, he maintained that control, reminding the public that while they were welcome to celebrate his work, his most sacred moments belonged to his family. It was a reminder of the line he had always drawn. Robert Redford, the actor, belonged to the world. But Robert Redford, the man, belonged only to those who knew him best. For fans, this choice brought mixed emotions. Some felt sorrow at not being able to participate in a public farewell, while others expressed admiration for a man who stayed true to himself until the end. Online, fans shared their own tributes, creating a kind of digital memorial that spanned continents. People recounted stories of seeing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid for the first time, of falling in love with cinema because of the sting, of discovering independent film through Sundance. The collective mourning unfolded not in one physical space, but across countless living rooms, cinemas, and memories. In that way, Robert Redford's funeral was everywhere, quietly woven into the hearts of those who loved him.